Hi, everybody. Charles Hoskinson here, broadcasting live from warm, sunny Colorado. I just returned from my long trip all around the world. Final trip was in Scotland. I was in Edinburgh for Plutus Fest, and that was a great degree of fun. I had a chance to finally sit down with the Plutus and Marlowe team, and I got the whole team together. It's a very diverse international team. So it was quite a bit of fun to see everybody in the same room at the same time. I also had a chance to shave, so the beard was getting pretty long, and now the fear of the beard, Charles, is over. I did want to give you guys a quick and brief update about where we have gone throughout this year and some things to look forward to towards the end of the year. So let's get to it. So it's been a very long year. It's been a year where we as a company, IOHK, and the broader Cardano ecosystem has definitely learned quite a bit. And through this process, we have done a lot. In particular, we've written over 40 papers, 20 of which have been peer-reviewed, and the other 20 are in some various stages of review or they're technical reports. We've learned how to do what Duncan Coutts likes to call evidence-based engineering, but it's more typically called specification-driven engineering, where we write a formal specification. The specification looks like some provenance of logic and mathematics. From that specification, you extract code, and then you're able to prove that your implementation is equivalent to that extracted code, and therefore you followed the spec. So come December 18th will be the very first time we've shipped anything in the history of Cardano that remotely connects to a specification, and that's going to be the 1.4 release. It took quite a bit of time for us to get to the 1.4 release. There were a variety of reasons for that. Some were structural reasons, some were scope creep, some were just we didn't fully anticipate the state of complexity of these things or the where the code base was at. But overall, we finally gotten there. It took 7 release candidates. It was quite a bit of effort. But I'm very happy to see how things have evolved. I'm very happy to see where we're at entering into 2019. Now, some lessons learned. We learned a completely new way of doing QA, a completely new way of running a help desk. Our help desk has serviced well over 10,000 tickets throughout its history. Our QA system has managed to dramatically decrease the QA cycle, massively improve the test coverage that we have for our product. And overall, they've just managed to aggregate together about 9 months worth of lessons over 4 major releases. And so going into 2019, we'll see better tested, smaller releases, less hot fixes, and certainly a much higher code quality. So while 2018 was very difficult, especially for us on the engineering side, 2019 will be much more manageable and easier for us. Furthermore, we've begun a systematic decoupling of things in our stack, starting with the wallet backend. The very next version of it will actually be completely decoupled, and we'll be able to connect the formally verified wallet backend from just the Haskell client to also connect it with our Rust client as well. So that decoupling should be finished sometime January. And actually, as a result of that, we're going to have a very fast development time for wallet backend features. This includes things like multi-sig. This includes things like manual selection of the UTXO, manual transaction creation, offline transactions. So we'll take a lot of the things that we've now seen with the Rust client. We'll be able to move these things into general Daedalus. So sometime during early 2019, within the first quarter likely, Daedalus will get a command line, and you'll be able to interface directly with the wallet backend through that command line, just through normal everyday Daedalus. And hopefully we'll be able to take that whole wallet scripting idea that we had with Cardano Rust and port that over into the main client so that there will be no difference between those two. We've had a huge amount of successes here with the Ouroboros program. I think this is one of the crown jewels. There's really 2 major crown jewels of Cardano's portfolio, the other being Plutus and Marlowe and our work with Yella and Kay. And Ouroboros is the other crown jewel. We've had a huge amount of success with it, starting with Ouroboros Praus earlier this year, going to Israel, to Ouroboros Genesis, where we went to Canada to CCS, to Ouroboros BFT. and all this surrounding infrastructure around Ouroboros. We now have multiple implementations of Ouroboros BFT. We actually have 5 separate implementations for varying degrees of uses, from our enterprise ledgers offering to stuff involving Cardano and things on the Scala side. We also have several prototype implementations of Ouroboros Genesis. In fact, the Haskell implementation of Ouroboros is so elegant, you can reparameterize the same code base to run in BFT mode, Prowse mode, or Genesis mode. And you can even put in different network stacks. So it's pretty cool, pretty interesting. Really excited to see how that evolved and materialized and how much we learned. And it's also really cool to see that we're now also having a really deep, involved conversation with how we intend on writing our ledger spec and how we intend on handling delegation. So we're going to be doing a workshop for IOHK and some of our third-party partners come early January in Berlin, specifically about the delegation specification and to finalize that specification. Much like Plutus Fest kind of forced us to finalize the specification for Plutus 1.0 and Marlowe 1.0, we'll be doing the exact same with the delegation specification, which will also be made publicly available, just like the wallet backend spec was made publicly available. What's really nice is we've actually managed to take the ledger spec, which defines all the rules for validating what is legitimate in ledger and what is not legitimate in ledger, and create almost like a DSL to describe different ledger rules. And so it's very easy for us to describe the old ledger, which is the Byron ledger, and what the new Shelley ledger is going to look like. And our hope is over a series of iterations to not only be able to do this easily, but also to massively simplify some of the rules where and when we can, so that we have overall simpler code base and we've eschewed unnecessary complexity, particularly around the update system and validation of whether an update is correct or not. So what's really exciting, though, is that because the ledger spec now lives as it does, and the network spec now lives as it does, and other parts of the system now live as they do, overall, the Cardano code base, I'd say, is considerably higher quality once Shelley is released than it's ever been in its history. And it's going to probably be the highest quality code base, I would argue, of any cryptocurrency ever made. And we'll have an enormous amount of evidence for that statement because we'll have great property-based testing. It'll be a very concise code base, wonderful end-to-end testing, and so forth. And any third party can take a look at it and just see that there's definitely a lot of thought that went into this, and have a very clear understanding of why the code behaves the way it does and how the code works and how to maintain and upgrade it. So long year, a lot of hard-fought battles, just ton of science, ton of engineering, very difficult to deal with all the exchanges, especially given that there were language barriers and cultural barriers and different incentive structures. And we had to deal with all of this while having a product and market that just couldn't work for certain people. Given that that was the case, early this year, I authorized the work of the Icarus program. And that was really one of our fastest pieces of engineering. We started in early March gathering business requirements and technical requirements, and we built an entire engineering team in less than 2 months. And that team, over a period of just 3 months, was able to actually build a wallet from scratch, involving both a Rust component and a JavaScript component, and have that go through a full security audit. And in short order, Emergo was able to take that reference code base, Icarus, and turn it into the Yoroi wallet. Since the time of launch, they've already done several major updates, and they've already accrued a very large user base, constituting 11% of the entire Cardano population. And they have some great statistics on uses and so forth. So that was a great win. And we're real excited and happy to see how fast that was able to materialize and come along. And we're also excited and happy to see that it's attracted some third-party participation like Vacuum Labs and others to start having conversations with us. Now, one of the most commonly requested integrations in our ecosystem has been Ledger. And I feel I should talk about Ledger a little bit, why there was some difficulty there. There was really 3 factors that came together that made it very difficult for us to get Ledger support right when we launched. First, we were using a different type of cryptography and a different type of HD wallet than what the Ledger team was normally used to encountering. So usually people have some variant of ECDSA. We were using ED 25519, and our HD wallet involved a non-deterministic, non-standard scheme. This was because of design decisions that Sarakel made. Now, while this didn't suffer a security issue, it was secure, it was quite difficult for people just to take something off the shelf and make this work easily. So that was one dimension. Second, there was a middleman involved on creating support on the ledger side. Principally, that was called MetaLayer. And they were working with the Cardano Foundation. And we've historically had some issues there. And unfortunately, because of that tripartite arrangement where there was IOHK, the Cardano Foundation, and a third-party developer, given the history and other things, it dramatically slowed down support and integration. And then finally, on our end, we had just simply other priorities. And really the thing that was holding us back was to move to a better, more standard way of handling the cryptographic side, namely deterministic addresses, which people see with Icarus-style wallets, and also to have a new wallet backend. So with the shipping of 1.4, half of that is done. And in the other half, the Icarus-style address support, because we've already done this once before with Icarus, it'll be very easy for us to roll that into the wallet backend. So come January, we anticipate Icarus-style addresses coming to the wallet backend. And the very next update of Cardano 1.5 will have support for this. Now, the good news is that now that the foundation issues have been resolved and Emergo has really started scaling up development with Yoroi, we've had a lot of discussions about bringing in a third-party firm, principally Vacuum Labs, to work with both of us to rapidly accelerate ledger support and get ledger support first in Yoroi, and then very shortly thereafter into Deadless with either the next most immediate update or the following update, so that you'll be able to use it with both a full node as well as a browser-based interface. Now, the first step was to have Vacuum Labs write a report, and they did. It was, I think, a 15, 16-page report about what is the state of the work that was done previously. And their estimate is there's about 30 to 50 man-days of engineering that needs to be done to clean up the work that's been done and make sure that the work that's been done is secure. So that's not too much. And for a moderately sized team, 2 to 3 people working with Emergo, it probably can be done in short order, but that requires a little bit more negotiation and a little bit more effort. So basically, we hear you, we understand you. There were factors that came into play that kind of pushed Ledger to the side a little bit, but now as an ecosystem, we're in a position where we can move much more quickly, and we have some great third-party support to allow us to move much more quickly. And I personally am a Ledger user. It's been a bit of a frustration for me not to have that in our ecosystem. The other factor, it's kind of a silent fourth factor, was it was never clear until the second half of our year exactly how we would handle cold staking with a hardware wallet device. There were many different ways we could do this, but we need some sort of basically offline or cold key management system built into Daedalus. And this was always anticipated to be something that we handled once we had released Shelley and we had a very clear crystallized UI UX planned out for the delegation center. I've been getting GUI scamps and mock-ups for the delegation center, the registration process, and a litany of other things that are Shelley related on a pretty regular basis. And we're converging to a final user experience for that. Now, as a subset of that, that will be the cold staking component. And there are 2 sides to that. One is the paper wallet side. So when a person has a paper wallet, there needs to be some mechanism for them to import a credential that allows them to delegate from that paper wallet without having the spending keys go live and hot and live within a computer. Second, there needs to be some sort of mechanism on the Ledger side to permit that for Avan or other hardware wallets. Now, Emergo is also keen on having Trezor support in addition to Ledger, and I think there's been some good progress made there as well. So these things are coming, and now that we have a decoupled wallet backend, we're converging in that direction, and that development team seeing a great acceleration, and we have low technical debt, very beautiful code to work with. These things will happen fast. As for the rest of the components of the system, the great advantage of the pain we've gone through and the lessons we've learned is that month by month, we continue to see much better metrics. We see faster development time, faster PRs, better testing, better code quality, more turnaround time. And when incidents happen, we're much more easily able to resolve those incidents. So I'm happy with the direction. We still need to do a lot of work. We have some divergent teams. Right now, we actually have a Rust team and a Haskell team, and both of them are building independent full clients for Shelley, and they're in a sudden death of whichever one finishes first. Our hope is that one of them can get to a test net quickly so that we can start building up the stake pool population. A few more things. A big component of the Shelley release isn't just having the technology ready and the science ready. We're converging to that. It's also having the community ready. And a big impediment throughout this entire year was the Cardano Foundation not making meaningful investments in community management. So there were a lot of programs that came up, but were just never funded or initiated. For example, one program was called a Cardano Ambassador Program, and the basic idea would be creating some mechanism to acknowledge people who have already made substantive contributions to the Cardano community and to try to create a structured way of communicating with them and potentially even funding their interest long term. And then the other concept is the Cardano Hub idea, where there were certain people who wanted to go above and beyond just making occasional, or in some cases, part to full-time contributions, and actually creating an organization. And that organization would do Cardano-related things within a jurisdiction and scope. Now, both of these ideas were working, pretty hand in hand, and there were a lot of really good discussions and attempts to create momentum. But the prior chairman of the Cardano Foundation always killed them and refused to fund them. Now that he's gone and he's been replaced with more reasonable minds, it's going to be a very big priority to make sure that these programs get launched as quickly as we can, because we need to start building up a bottom-up community all across the world and to augment the community we've already had growing. It's not to say that we don't have some structure. There's already a lot of meetup groups, some surprisingly large and surprisingly diverse locations. For example, there are some people in Iran. There's a surprisingly large group in Colombia, Bogota, Colombia. There's a great group of people in Eastern Europe, in places like Bulgaria and places like Romania. Good group of people in Ukraine, a great group of people in South Korea and Japan, all throughout the countries. It's just we need to do a better job as an ecosystem of providing resources to those who have taken the time to become evangelists in our community and to say good and positive things and teach people about what we're doing. So now that the foundation is back, very soon statements will be made, efforts will be made to try to scale these programs and get them out as quickly as possible. Now, as an output of good community management and as an output of an ambassador program and meetup groups, will naturally be lots of people wanting to run stake pools. And the way that we've decentralized the protocol, we anticipate having roughly 1,000 or more participating in the system. And our hope is to get to that number as quickly as we can. So we ran a pilot just to see what was interest back earlier this year around April. And the registration did get far more than 1,000 people who expressed interest in running a staking pool. So our hope is to reconstitute that soon, within the next 60 days, and to then try to convert that list as soon as we can when a Shelley testnet is operational, to get as many people as we can to play around with that Shelley testnet and to learn how staking works and to get ready for the decentralization of the entire system. We've seen a lot of FUD this year. Some of it was just because of common misunderstandings or applying things that other cryptocurrencies are dealing with to us. And in some cases, they were just baseless lies and attempts to just make people really worried about things they ought not to be. One thing, for example, was this concept of, well, because Shelley is delayed, whatever this means, that everything else is delayed. The reality is that the smart contract work was following a different path than the consensus work, the delegation work, and the rewriting of the entire code base. The smart contract stuff was done by a Scala team and done by a language designing team. The language designing team was led by Phil Wadler and Manuel Chavardi, and they're based at the University of Edinburgh, and they had their own group, their own resources, and they were following a 2-year track. And that Plutus track and Marlowe track have now come to a research end, and we've been moving into actual implementation. So none of the Shelley delays from the Ouroboros side and the delegation side cascaded into the language side. They've been moving along at a pretty good pace, and we're quite happy with the progress made. Furthermore, the work with Yella was done with a fork of the Mantis client, and we ran 2 test nets, and they've been operational since the summer. And we've learned a huge amount about that model. Runtime verifications learned a lot about from that model. And in short order, we should be able to productize that. So we're on target and on schedule for smart contracts. And what's going to end up happening is that the Shelley release is going to come out a little later than anticipated. So originally we wanted it to come out this year. Now we'd like it to come out as close to Q1 as possible, unless there's some major event where it makes sense to slide it a week or two for that event. The smart contracts side was always anticipated to come out somewhere around the late first half, early second half of 2019. So that time frame for smart contracts is still quite reasonable in our view, and there's no reason why it wouldn't be rather straightforward to roll quickly into that. So there's still a lot more to do. There's still a lot more testing to do. But the concepts like extended UTXO, how Plutus works, how to integrate Plutus, how to integrate side chains, how to run a side chain with the Mantis network and roll that over into production code, these things are very well understood. And it basically puts us in a good position to quickly move in that direction. So I'm happy with that. And I'm glad to see there's no slowdown. There's been some other FUD, some recent FUD, I guess somehow out of the EOS community, is saying something like all the Japanese who purchased ADA years ago are apparently locked, and when ADA was launched on the exchanges, new ADA was issued to somehow create liquidity, and that the Japanese are still locked up. Let me be exceedingly clear. 100% of the people who bought ADA have access to it, or were given access to it, and can redeem and have redeemed. And if you look at the Genesis block, you can see the vast majority of the Genesis ADA has moved, and a lot of people have sold it, traded it, still holding it, but everyone has liquidity. There are no special groups of people. There were no tiers where certain people got sweetheart deals or shares in a company or something like that. It was sold in a very straightforward way. And it's just unbelievable to me that these lies are spreading. And it just shows you the character of that community. And it just shows you who these people are when they have to just say things that are not only false, but provably so. You can just look at the distribution of ADA in the Genesis block and see the transactions that have flown. There is no group of people that's locked. My ADA is locked because I chose that. But there's no one who participated in the sale is locked. This is insane. It's a bizarre statement, and it's something that should not spread. And when you see somebody saying it, they are lying. But I've come to expect that from this community. They just lie repeatedly, even when they're faced with overwhelming evidence that the things they say are wrong. They then turn it back at you and say, "Prove us wrong." And then you show them the evidence, and they just ignore it. So this is just where we're at in the cryptocurrency space. Concepts like maybe if you say scientific claims, you should have them go through peer review. Maybe if you claim you've implemented software in a certain way, you should have some evidence that the software behaves that way. That's the concept of using specification-driven development, considering these protocols have to be around a long time. People just for some bizarre reason tend to ignore these things or say these things are irrelevant or unnecessary. I don't understand why. I don't really want to hazard a guess. It's just when it comes up, my job to say that it's not true. So anyway, it's been a long year. We've had a lot of ups and downs, and it's been hard in the markets. It's been hard for the community as a whole. I've been to 30 countries. I think more than almost 60 events, and I've had a chance to meet a heck of a lot of good people and see a lot of great passion from people who have gotten tattoos with our logo on it, to people who planted trees for us, people named their kids after us in South Korea. And there's no evidence at all that the community is slowing down. There's no evidence at all that we're losing momentum. It's actually quite the contrary. I see month by month more people joining the community, more people downloading the wallet. We can track those statistics, And I see a lot of people extremely excited about the future. And given that decentralization and smart contracts and a lot of our good features, which have been in long arc R&D, are now coming out in 2019. We have a resurrected Cardano foundation. Amerigo is starting to really get things going, and our Pan-African strategy is really starting to show some fruit. And our enterprise framework is going to start rolling out in 2019 throughout Africa, which will bring lots of people into our ecosystem kind of transitively. I think that our best days are ahead of us. There's still going to be a lot of hard days, and there's going to be a lot of events that hit us from unexpected angles, but we seem to be very resilient. And the other thing that's really exciting is this is a self-healing ecosystem. When there were issues with the foundation, the first to bring these issues to the public were not treasured insiders, but it was the guardians of Cardano and third-party entities. And Cardano really is already very decentralized. There are so many people around who keep us accountable, who create podcasts, who set up meetup groups, who are doing interesting development work, building their own explorers, building their own wallets, sometimes good ones, sometimes not so good ones. Now, because Plutus Playground's out and Yella's out, people are using these things to write interesting scripts and anticipation for the network launching, and sending hundreds of emails with advice and well wishes and sometimes constructive criticism. That's the sign of a healthy, vibrant community, and it's one that I've only seen once before, not with Ethereum, but with Bitcoin itself. So I believe very firmly that our best days are ahead of us, and I believe very firmly that Cardano is definitely going to be a big, big, big deal in 2019, as it has already been in 2018 and at its launch in 2017. So some other housekeeping items real briefly. First off, Ethereum Classic. This one has been a pretty difficult topic for me personally, because Ethereum Classic was the unintended product, the unintended project. There was no plan to create Ethereum Classic. It came as a result of an event. And back when I joined the community, it was unclear whether the community was going to go anywhere, the project was going to go anywhere. It was unclear if Ethereum Classic was going to survive, but it was mostly a protest coin. We said, we don't know where we're going. We don't know what's going to happen. But, we feel that this issue with the DAO hack has been handled very poorly, and that many people invested in, who got involved in Ethereum, believing that code is law. Even language was made a legality, and a lot of people cared a lot about basically preserving the original intent as they saw it of the Ethereum blockchain, which had then been violated by this hard fork. So as a consequence, we felt it was absolutely necessary to give people a choice and say, maybe it's the minority chain, maybe it's the majority chain, but you can't just go ahead and do something like this and then say, well, you're forced to do this. There needs to be some sort of dissent. And that dissent needs to be encouraged to survive and thrive and hopefully grow and become its own thing. So I put my money where my mouth was, opened up my wallet, and spent my own money to build a client from scratch. Now, lots happened since that event. We've seen Mantis grow from a concept to an actual production system that now works both with Ethereum and Ethereum Classic. And members of the Ethereum Foundation have even reached out to us asking us to find a way to change the software license, which we will do from MIT to Apache, and try to make it a Hyperledger project so that people in the Ethereum ecosystem can use our code base for their products and projects, and it can be under good governance. We've also seen now 2 major summits for Ethereum. One was in South Korea, the other was in Hong Kong. And we've seen a formation of a reasonable governance group within the ecosystem. So there's an open question now of, well, what should IOHK's participation be with Ethereum Classic? And does this participation in any way compromise our ability to work on Cardano, slow it down, or in some way compete with the mission, goal, and vision of Cardano? Well, in a way, there's been a great degree of synergy. The work on Ethereum Classic has definitely helped us have a production system that we could very quickly repurpose to test Ethereum interoperability for smart contracts on our system. So just by having Mantis, we were very easily able to plug in the KEVM and plug in Yella and run Solidity code in our system. It would have been much harder to do that and more expensive to run these tests had we not done what we did with Ethereum Classic. Second, building that client trained our developers to understand how the Ethereum ecosystem worked. They literally started from nothing, just from the yellow paper and from the documentation, and wrote 100% new code in Scala. So that exercise was incredibly valuable, creating a knowledge transfer and bridging the skill gap so that we understood where Ethereum sat and all the things it could do and all the things it couldn't do. It's easy to be overly academic or to kind of throw the baby out with the bathwater and design an entirely new model. It's a lot harder to be pragmatic and learn from your competitors of where they sit, what they're doing, and where they're going. And we gain that benefit as a consequence of creating that client. So it really did help us in a certain respect, and it really did enrich our company. The challenge for me is that I'm spending my own money on building this, and we've never gotten a revenue source from the construction of this client. To date, we haven't received any money from Digital Asset Foundation or Digital Asset Holdings or whatever the heck, Digital Asset Group or Digital Currency Group. I can't remember the name right now. Barry's Group or ETC Lab or any development grant. So at the moment, we've made nothing from participating in ETC. And at some point as a CEO of a company, I do have to make a decision of, well, when and where do we stop spending money? When and where do we stop contributing resources for something that doesn't contribute back? One of the most difficult parts for our participation was that we predicted that there would be funding issues with Ethereum. We wrote several blog posts and lectured on a pretty regular basis about the need for something like a treasury in Ethereum Classic, making the argument that if we existed solely on a donation model, that the people who didn't have the luxury of pre-existing wealth or a business model to subsidize these things would frankly be unable to long-term maintain and innovate and compete, especially given people who had quite a bit of funding. Unfortunately, ETC Dev and others were very much against the funding of a treasury. Some incredibly harsh statements were written, and those statements were endorsed or casually accepted by people from ETC Dev. Ironically, ETC Dev apparently is shutting its doors because it hasn't been able to pay its bills as predicted. So now we're left in a situation where we're not getting any value as a company for contributing to Ethereum Classic. We're left in a situation where the community's been very resistant historically to attempting to create mechanisms such as a treasury system to give us some certainty that if we participate as a company in the effort, we can recoup our losses, recoup our bills, and continue to contribute, and that we've already gained as much value as a company as we can from Ethereum Classic. At the moment, there's nothing innovative in the roadmap unless we propose something, and we do have many great things. We have NEPA POWs, we have a DAG protocol called Parallel Change, which works very well for proof of work. We have considerable improvements we've made to the Ethereum virtual machine. And all of these things could be put into Ethereum Classic. They take time, effort, and money, and a great degree of coordination. And to me, it doesn't feel like it's worth the effort to put these things in, given the current structure of things. So we'll talk to the existing members of the Ethereum Classic community and see if there's some way that our continued participation can be subsidized. If we can't come to that arrangement, what we're going to do is retire the Mantis client for Ethereum Classic. We'll continue to support the Hyperledger version if we can get it into the Hyperledger group for Ethereum support, because there's commercial value in that. And we'll move that team to other projects. It's unfortunate it's come to this, but these are the realities of the markets we're in, the realities of the resources that we're in. And also, I feel that a 2-year commitment off of a moral victory, moral statement is enough. You cannot make an unlimited, infinite commitment to something. You have to, at some point, say that there has to be something that comes back. And we've delivered At the moment, you could run 100% of the Ethereum Classic network on Mantis. It is still the only client that was built from the ground up specifically for Ethereum Classic, and it was built in Scala, and it was built with great engineering practices, and it was built by great engineers, and it was built in a very transparent way. If you go to our YouTube page, and IOHK YouTube, you can see the weekly stand-up meetings that we did for Mantis, and I think there's damn near 100 of them. And we didn't miss a single one. Every week we showed up, and even if there was a little progress or a lot of progress, we showed it off, and people could watch us go from an idea to a fully constructed client, and they can see the commits in the repositories. I'm very proud of that, and I think it was a great effort. So moving into 2019, we'll see what we do, but at the moment, unless a funding source comes in for Ethereum Classic, we're going to retire that team. We learned a lot. We love the community. We love the people there, and we think it was worth the effort and worth the time that was put in. But like all good things, must come to an end at some point, and we're going to move in a different direction unless there's funding to stay in this current course, in this direction. Another announcement is that the Cardano Foundation recently appointed 3 new members: Nathan Kaiser, Donald Berkey, and Manmeet Singh. And these members are interim members. Their purpose is to clean up the foundation, build systems that have been lacking over the last 2 years, start up programs like the Hub program, the Ambassador program, and litany of other things, and then to appoint a new board, a large, diverse board that represents the community. So a statement will be made at a later date about the specifics of this arrangement, and those members, after they have a chance to dig deeper into the organization and finally see certain records and finally be able to get the foundation to be a bit more proactive in getting things handled, its affairs handled, will then look outward and talk to how they're going to provide value and benefit for the community. But it's a great achievement. It's something that took quite a bit of time and effort and negotiations and hard work, and we're very happy to see that outcome. So anyway, those are the announcements there. And in closing about all of this, Cardano's doing well, and it's been an adult year. 2017 was kind of the kids' year. Everybody was excited and happy. It didn't matter if you'd actually done real work or not. It didn't matter if you made progress or not. You could be a copy of a copy of a copy and still have $1 billion market cap, and still get funded and still be able to go to any conference, and everybody thought you were great. 2018, what's happened is we've seen a lot of projects winnow out, products collapse, teams fall apart, infighting occur, funding dry up, and it's separated the real things from the fake things. And I believe that we've passed the test, and we're still here. We're still going strong. Unlike certain competitors, we're not laying people off in our company. We're growing and still hiring, and we're quite well funded, and our people are moving in the right direction. Furthermore, I like to believe the approach that we've taken, the peer review approach and the specification-driven development approach, while horrifically expensive in the short term, is paying dividends. It's given us a lingua franca as an organization to speak about complicated concepts like delegation, like ledger validation, like smart contracts, like how a wallet functions, and to have this language be utilized amongst engineers, business professionals, scientists, lawyers, and other entities. And as a consequence of that, we have organizational clarity on how these things are put together and if these things are actually going to work at scale. This is not something we feel our competitors have, and not something we feel our competitors fully understand. And as we get into more complicated systems, if we get into systems that behave with millions of users, tens of millions of users, that require regular upgrades, I think we're really going to start seeing that delta grow. So while it's been hard, I think it's been worthwhile. And what's really made it most worthwhile has been the Cardano community as a whole. It's been really phenomenal and exciting to see just how many people have wished us well, participated with us, given us helpful, handy suggestions, introduced us to new cool ideas, and to see how quickly our vision and message has spread. If there was anything to take away from 2018, is that Cardano is made by you, the community. And as long as the community is strong, I honestly do believe that this will become the financial operating system of the developing world. So thank you all for listening. I do appreciate it. And I look forward to seeing everybody in 2019. And it's going to be a really good year. And it's going to be a lot more fun giving an update then than it is now. And I think that everything is going to be okay. Cheers.